What's going on, guys? Carmine here, and welcome to my Season 6, Episode 9 review for Game of Thrones. Naturally, because this is the dreaded Episode 9, we got some explosive action and all-out badass scenes involving some of our main characters. We get the Battle of Fire and Meereen quickly being decided by Dany and her dragons, and the Battle of Ice on the outskirts of Winterfell between House Bolton and their allies versus House Stark and those loyal to them. I've noticed many websites and reviewers giving this episode a perfect 10, and I can see why, but at the same time, there were some problems here and there. We'll get to them, but ultimately, it was a very good episode, and I'm satisfied with how it played out. The burning question remains, did the epicness of this episode make up for the last few that weren't up to par with the show? And the answer to that is no. As Stannis would tell you, the good does not wash out the bad, but it does make it stink a little less, so there's that. Once again, keep in mind that I am a reviewer, and I will be letting you know what I liked and disliked, and yes, you can expect some nitpicking here because nothing's perfect. Now, with that out of the way, let's get on to it. First, let's start in Meereen, and let me just say, I was correct. Dany does come in and she saves the day with her dragons. Episode 8 did ruin the suspense and sense of peril that Meereen had when the Masters began attacking by having Dany show up when she did. I think it would have been a lot better to have Tyrion meet up with the Masters for talks, and then have her and the Dothraki come out of nowhere to kick ass and change the tide of battle. While that may sound a bit more Hollywood, I can forgive it if we get to see 3 dragons in action, which is something that hasn't happened since the end of Season 2. But that aside, I did enjoy the Meereen stuff this time around. I would have liked to see more of the Masters' armies and not just their naval power try to take out Meereen. That way we could see more of the Dothraki in action. I would have also liked to have seen more of the Unsullied fighting in the streets against the Harpies, considering, this was supposed to be an all-out war against one place. You'd kind of want to do more than just bombard them from afar, The reason I say this is because it almost becomes like a cheaty hack to have dragons do everything instead of armies, and it makes Dany's storyline almost boring in a sense. It wasn't boring in this episode, don't get me wrong, but over-relying on dragons to take care of all your problems just seems like a one-way ticket to snooze fest in terms of storytelling. It makes almost every single threat that she'll be facing have less power, and I hope they try to avoid that and still find a way to make any of her future enemies more threatening and interesting. And the reason that the Siege of Meereen in the books is more of an entertaining thing is because Dany isn't there to coordinate her dragons to attack, mainly because she is still out in the wild with Drogon, and because her other 2 dragons are just flying around causing chaos. The Siege of Meereen became even more chaotic when the Ironborn show up to complicate everything, whereas here it's all over in an instant. Personally, I would have liked to see Grey Worm try to coordinate a counterattack against the Harpies who have begun to invade the city and the Great Pyramid, then have the Ironborn show up from the rear and attack the Master's ships. Maybe see Yara and Theon fighting their men and giving the Ironborn soldiers the spotlight to show that they actually don't suck, all the while Tyrion goes down and frees the other 2 dragons in the hopes of having them turn the tide in their favor, and then we have Dany come in and do what she does. If I was writing for the show, that is how I would do it. I will put an emphasis on how crazy and chaotic battles can be to parallel what was going on over in Winterfell. But like I said, I did enjoy what we got with Meereen, but I just wish more characters had more screen time to do their own thing. Also, I've got to give props to Grey Worm here, who hasn't seen action since the first half of Season 5. That double neck slice was awesome. I also really like how Dany comes back and Tyrion is trying to explain how things are kind of working out, despite the crap being flung into the city. I also love his banter with the other characters, except Missandei and Grey Worm. That shit can be cringy as hell. But after the battle, we get a nice little scene between Dany, Tyrion, Yara, and Theon, who I never thought would be meeting each other in 1,000 years. If anything, I always thought it would have been like Arya that meets up with Dany, or maybe even Samwell Tarly. But Yara explains the situation, and we find out that they actually escaped with 100 ships, which is more than I expected, but it isn't enough for Dany's army. She needs 900 more, and maybe some extra ones for her dragons to chill on for the ride over to Westeros. What I was really loving were Tyrion going after Theon for the shit he gave him in Season 1, and Dany's interactions with Yara, who is either a bisexual or a lesbian. Either way, HBO, you're so close to making my fantasies come true. All we need now is Sansa to join in, and we got ourselves a party. But here we are, my friends. It seems that Dany is finally heading on over to Westeros by next season. Just nobody please tell her that there are more slave cities. Jesus Christ, if she finds out, we'll never leave this fucking place. Now let's turn our attention to the Battle of Bastards. The prelude includes a nice little conversation between John, Sansa, and Ramsay. Ramsay was a little off his game during his first meeting with John, especially during the whole, will your men want to fight for you when they hear you wouldn't fight for them? You can tell that really got to him, and he definitely lost that little engagement, but that was John's mistake. maybe Sansa's right. Maybe Ramsay would have never let Rickon live, but if there was any chance of that happening, pissing off Ramsay definitely helped put a nail in Rickon's coffin. Ramsay wanted to return the favor by pissing John off and trying to goad him into charging, which he later does. Before we get to that, let me just say that I absolutely love the conversation between Davos and Tormund. I love little discussions like that among characters you couldn't imagine being in the same room together. Hopefully we get to see Tormund and Bronn together at some point. I also really liked Sansa and Jon. I agree that Sansa should have been involved in the discussions because she does know the most about him. In the book Art of War by Sun Tzu, he states that in order to defeat your enemy, you must know him and yourself. Since Jon Snow knows nothing, I think he could have used Sansa's advice and tips. As for Melisandre, while I thought her scene with Jon was cool, I absolutely loved how they cut to her face later on when the Bolton banners are thrown to the ground, because in Season 5, she did tell Stannis that she saw them coming down in the fire, and I must say, where the hell was she in the battle? In Season 3, she tells Davos that if she were there during the Blackwater, she could have saved the men from the wildfire, yet she wasn't in the Battle of Bastards at all. You'd think she would try and spawn a few shadow babies to go assassinate Ramsay, but I guess you could argue that it would take extra time that they don't have for the shadow babies to grow inside her. Plus, you need king's blood, and it's very debatable if Jon's a king or not. But let's get to the battle, and in short, it was epic as all hell, but I did have a few nitpicky problems with it. For example, Ramsay is playing his game with Rickon and shooting arrows at the boy, but I've gotta say, Rickon, don't you know what a zigzag is? Damn, dude, I was yelling the whole time, zigzag, you asshole, zigzag! It would have made it a little harder for Ramsay to kill him, but nope. He dies because, of course, that little asshole has done nothing in this show, and like every other cameo, he's only back to die so they can tie up loose ends. I call bullshit on this. Not only that, but what really annoyed me is why didn't they give Wun a weapon? In the Season 4 dreaded Episode 9, one of the giants had a bow and arrow. Couldn't they have given Wun some kind of club made from a tree or something? Hell, even a shield would have helped a lot. He could have bashed through the entire Bolton defense line if he had hid behind something and just ran through them. My last complaint about the battle has got to be the Shakey Cam. Seriously, you guys need to hire a cameraman that doesn't do heroin. Hold that fucking thing steady, goddammit. It's like we have a monkey filming this whole scene, and you guys know me. It was one of my major complaints from the Oberyn versus the Mountain fight. I just love those steady wide shots that show us exactly what's happening and who's fighting who. The Shakey Cam while Jon was in that clusterfuck of men being smothered together, I can understand the Shakey Cam for that. But all those aside, it was an amazing battle and a great episode. The one thing I would have wished happened was to have seen Jon fighting alongside Ghost. Back in Season 2, we heard rumors of Robb Stark fighting alongside his direwolf, and I would have loved to have seen that with Jon. It would mirror the two perfectly and definitely set up some discussions about Jon being the new king in the North. I don't know why they didn't include him, but I guess you could argue that the reason we didn't see Ghost was because Jon had him stay back to protect Sansa, or maybe Jon had him scouting out the area to pick off any Bolton scouts who wanted to sneak up on them. I just think it's a bit weird for them not to include a 5 seconds of dialogue where Jon tells Ghost, "Okay boy, stay with Sansa." But all that aside, let's get to what I did like, and this may sound like a cop-out, but I absolutely loved all of it. The Battle of Bastards did not disappoint, and it definitely deserves a place in the dreaded Episode 9 spot. What I loved about it was that it did more than any other battles we've have done, and what I mean by that is that it showed the nitty-gritty details of an actual battle. Horses charging into each other, men with their guts spilled out, people climbing over each other, blood and mud all over the place. It definitely wasn't the type of fight you'd see in The Lord of the Rings, where someone slides down the stairs on a shield while firing arrows at you. But the one thing the show does best is its fight scenes, and it definitely gave us a horrific but momentous feel of it, and for that, it definitely deserves to be up there in one of the best episodes the series has dished out so far. Personally, I will always love the Battle of Hardhome, but this is right up there along with it. I will say the CGI stood out a bit in some places, especially when Jon is about to be mowed down by the Bolton cavalry, and then his cavalry come from behind him just in time. But at the same time, I loved it. Watching him just get a little overwhelmed by what's happening all around with those guys smashing into each other, and a little afterwards how it was chaotic. Men being flung everywhere, guys trying to run up to him to attack. It was all just amazing. It was also really cool seeing those Bolton banners dip to the ground and the House Stark sigil being flown once again in the Winterfell. It was very satisfying. The one thing I will say that wasn't was that 1v1 between John and Ramsay. Now this is just my personal opinion, but I expected more of a fight out of Ramsay. I expected Jon to win because he's been through more fights than Ramsay, but I did expect some kind of epic fist fighting to go down, but no. Ramsay went down like a bitch. I said it before and I'll say it again, I haven't seen a worse one-on-one like that since the Mayweather-Pacquiao fight. But in the end, it was an amazing episode. I wasn't too keen on Ramsay's death because I felt like he should have been burned alive so we could hear his sinister laugh throughout Winterfell, but being eaten alive by his dog seems fitting enough. This is definitely one of the most brutal deaths that will be tough to beat for characters who have it coming. But like I said, it was a great episode. Really happy that despite this season being a little iffy in some places, that they managed to keep the dreaded 9 still awesome with a lot of surprises. I also need to give a shout out to my favorite character, Peter Baelish, at the end for that Rohirrim charge. I was expecting them to come in late, but I'm glad they arrived just in time to turn the tide of battle. Now, before I end the video, as always, I'd like to share with you guys some people in the community who I think deserve your attention. When the season began, I shared Miss Lauren's Etsy page, where she made some cool charcoal paintings from the show. I'm happy to report she's restocked a bit with some of the house sigils, which include Stark, Targaryen, Lannister, and Tyrell, with more on the way. I'll leave a link in the description below so you can all check them out and pick up a few for yourselves. Guys, thank you so much for watching. As always, if you enjoy the video, then show me some love and hit that like button. Subscribe if you're new here, and I'll see you all next time. Have a good one.